So you're going to demand justice, and you and others have filed formal complaints, and we have them red-handed talking to the government, colluding to keep the public from getting information that should be public. I mean, that certainly is a conspiracy to engage in a cover-up.
It's worse than that. It's also against every rule of science, because the only way science can work is if people who publish results on which the largest tax increase and the largest abandonment of freedom ever conceived is about to be negotiated here at Copenhagen, they have not been sharing their results and their computer programs and their data with other scientists so that those other scientists can check them. All of this has been done behind closed doors so that they could get away with what turns out to be not just an information offense, but also a very serious scientific and financial criminal fraud for which a very long sentence in prison is the appropriate remedy. And what I have had is requests from two immensely senior professors, one in the United States and one in Canada, that I should draft for them complaints to the British police, because they don't know how we do it here. They want me to just do that for them. They will make sure that I've got all the facts correct, and they've both sent me a large amount of information about the facts in their case, because they're named in these emails in the most uncomplimentary way, and it's very clear that a plot to devalue their scientific research by unfair and foul and dishonest means had been engaged in by the conspirators who have been talking to each other in these emails. So I will be going to see the police superintendent in the East Anglia Constabulary, who is heading up the investigation into who the whistleblower is and whether he should be prosecuted. And I can tell you from now he won't be prosecuted, because we have legislation which allows whistleblowers to bring criminal offences to the attention of the public in this way without suffering any penalty themselves. So the whistleblower will not be prosecuted. However, I will be saying to the police officer that there is clear and systematic evidence of deliberate, wide-scale fraud right across the meteorological community, in NASA, in NOAA, in the University of East Anglia, in Penn State University, in universities and institutions of learning right across the world, where a small coterie of malevolent scientists, I mean, they come across as very nasty people in the way they write about everybody else that disagrees with them. They're very nasty people, they're highly politically motivated, and they're very bad and incompetent scientists, and also very vicious to anyone who dares to disagree. And this unpleasantness is the first thing that strikes anyone who reads these emails. But of course, unfortunately, here at Copenhagen, most of the people basically can't read at all, as far as I can see. And so the idea that they would read these emails is unthinkable. Of course,
well, yes, sir. The propaganda looks like it's the propaganda looks like it's directed at 3-year-olds. Pictures of children saying, "Please don't let me drown." But isn't it important to get these charges rolling while Copenhagen's going on, because that will really blow up in the establishment's face, and that's why they're panicking, because they know they've been engaging in all this crime. Earlier last week, I'm sure you're aware of this, you're always a few steps ahead of us or more, or several leagues ahead of us. It's now coming out that the UN had documents, AP and Fox reported it, where they were recruiting and directing scientists in this fraud and in this artificial consensus from behind the scenes. So we have the United Nations directly in there as, really the king rat orchestrating this.
Oh, of course, there's been a lot of evidence of this. One of the people who is very prominently named in the emails, indeed one of the people exchanging these emails, is the person who the UN called in to rewrite the 1995 second major climate assessment report. They do these every 5 years, the UN. Really big reports. So this is the sort of what the bedwetters base their case on. Say, well, the UN says this. Now, the UN said in its 1995 report, and this was what the scientists, around 1,000 of them, had signed off on. What they said was, there is no detectable human influence on global temperature. We can't find any. We don't know when we will find one. We're not sure that there is any such thing. Now, they said that 5 times. Along comes one man, at the request of the UN. This is how we know this has the UN right in the middle of all this. At the request
Lord
of the
Monkton,
UN,
we've got a break.
He rewrote the report.
We've got a break. We're going to come back with this key information straight ahead.
Sword and pistol by my side.
The explosive knowledge
Lost her baubles to my trade.
that Lord Monkton has is amazing. And you know I don't get guessed up here and kiss up to them. When I read his reports, his essays, when I look at his documentation, when I see him speak on television or radio, the way he lays it out is so amazing because it's such a huge subject. And today he's going right at the fraud, and he was finishing up with the fraud and the criminal investigations and how it's premeditated fraud to establish a collectivist world government controlled by large financial interests that literally are setting themselves up as emperors of the planet. And you were finishing up, sir, but in the time we've got, I then want to get into the fact that you went and demanded and bent the will of these Copenhagen UN bureaucrats to cough up the latest secret version of the treaty with taxes on money, financial transfers. I mean, this is off the charts. Then I want to get your take on the propaganda on the ground there. I want to get your take on what all the scientists are out there talking about, how many people will die and starve to death if even a small of the, amount of this is implemented, what the biofuels has already done. I mean, this is so monstrous. Please continue.
Right. Where would you like me to start?
Well, you got cut off by the break. You got cut off by the break getting into the fraud, but I want to...
Yes, I was just saying that I've had these two eminent professors who've asked me to put a case to the police, and as soon as I get back from this conference, I will be going to see the senior police officer, the police superintendent in the East Anglia Constabulary, investigating this matter. I will be laying their reports before him. I will be asking for a 2-hour briefing so that I can brief him on the background to this fraud, because, you know, if you're a police officer and you're not a climatologist, and somebody comes in and says, look, these people are lying and they're making up data, you'd never just believe it. You need to be properly briefed. And I'm hoping they're going to let me brief them on this so that they can understand just how monstrous is the manufacturing of data. Let's just take, for instance, the EPA's decision to try and say that carbon dioxide is an endangerment to human health under the Clean Air Act.
And it's being announced. It's being announced to coincide with Copenhagen.
Absolutely. Of course it was announced to coincide with Copenhagen. And this is clear politicking, again, of the worst kind. But the technical document on which that is based contains a graph lifted from a UN document and not checked, which pretends to suggest that the rate at which global warming is happening has been accelerating over the last 150 years, and particularly in recent years, in the last 25 years. Now, that graph is based on a well-known scientific fraud, it's a statistical fraud, in fact, called the endpoint fallacy, where you take a stochastic data set, that's one where you have to guess which way it's going to jump next. Temperature records are like that. It doesn't follow an ordered curve, it jiggles up and down a lot. And stochastic data sets like that are highly sensitive to precisely the point at which you start and end your trend line. And the UN has used this fact to try to convey an entirely false, entirely bogus and fraudulent impression, which has been recited over and over again by ignorant politicians, that the rate of warming is at itself accelerating, and the EPA, instead of checking independently, as I wrote and told it to do, instead just lifted this material out of the UN's, as we now know, thoroughly tainted documents without bothering to check it. And guess who was the lead author of the part of the UN document which produced this bogus graph? It was none other than one of the conspirators in the ClimateGate scandal. So we can tie all these people together in a series of frauds that now links in the EPA itself. And because the director of the EPA did not respond, she didn't even answer the submissions that I and many others put in, she herself is now going to be indicted for fraud because she's made herself part of the fraud by being warned that she was relying on documents that were themselves fraudulent, such as this graph, which is plainly fraudulent. And we know she used it because it's in the technical document that she published. And instead of withdrawing that, putting in a supplementary document saying we still believe we're right, but we can't rely on that draft anymore. She has done nothing about it. She has therefore become part of a very serious international scientific and financial fraud, and she will have to go to jail.
Amazing. Lord Monkton, is this not, as many researchers and scientists are billing it, the greatest scientific fraud of history? I mean, they're going for total world government, a takeover of the entire economy, total control of society. It's a fraud by design. They weren't mistaken. They knew it was a fraud. Answer that question on the other side of this quick break, and then we're going to go over the treaty, over what's happening in Copenhagen. He is there, and we're going to give you his official website.